Hi everybody. Welcome to this webinar. This has clearly got a lot of people interested. So I'll come to that again in a minute. But just to kind of introduce myself, so I've worked in-house in NHS communications for more than 25 years. I also have my own business where I train and support public sector communications pros to develop and deliver behaviour change campaigns in-house without breaking the bank. I'm really passionate about that, and I really enjoy helping people kind of take the guesswork out of their campaigns using behavioural science. And soon I'm going to be focusing on that full time. So if anybody, if I can help any of you or your teams to do that, please do get in touch. This webinar is part of the Public Health Communications Hub, which I set up with the support of CAM just over 2 years ago as a place to share learning and share good practice and create a bit of a community amongst those of us working in public health comms. In public health communications, we get sent a lot of toolkits, often with graphics and posts which are intended for use, on our social media channels across multiple organisations. And just to kind of illustrate that, I was looking earlier at the Department of Health and Social Care Campaign Resource Centre, and in the last 12 months or so alone, there's been 23 of these added or updated. On top of that, we get ones developed by UK HSA. We get regional ones developed for us, and we get ones from lots and lots of national charities. So really, I'd just like to ask you to do a quick poll. So just move my arm. So I'd like you to just either on your phones or on the computer, go to slido.com or scan the QR code, and just say when you share content from toolkits like these, what impact are you expecting to get, or hoping to get? I'm just be really interested to see what you think. So at the moment, more than half of you are thinking that when we're sharing this kind of content is going to be not very impactful or not impactful at all. Yeah, which is interesting. I will keep that poll open, so if you haven't voted yet, please do. And we'll share the final results with you afterwards, maybe. But I think really what the question I'd like to ask is why are we doing that then? And I'm going to bring Alex in now to share his experience and talk about the work that he did looking into this.
Great, thank you. That was like election night. That was exciting. So thank you, Russell, and thank you, Can, for putting this on. I'm Alex Waddington. I run Whetstone Communications. So I had a fairly longish career as an in-house communicator in not-for-profit roles. That's probably a good summary. These days, I help communications professionals like yourselves embrace data. So I'm a communicator first of all, and then I've upskilled in data analysis and data insights. So yeah, work with teams on things like training, but also projects looking at how data can be used to be more deliver more effectively. And one of the things I do, as has been alluded to, I spend a lot of time looking at social media data, helping teams with deep dive audits. So that's kind of how I come to this topic. I've done a little bit of work in health in the last year or two as well. So as Russell alluded to, I kicked off, I suppose, this with I might be responsible for the reason we're all here, and I think just before I go into that, I think it's interesting for me as well in terms of a sort of new vision for PR and communications by extension, and the CIPR are part of this as well. But as a recent PRCA member, I'm really liking the new sort of vision that's being consulted on and will be published fairly soon, the new principles for PR and comms, which is that they should be grounded in insight, informed by data and based on evidence rather than intuition alone. And I think this is sort of part of it today, that social media has changed. Organic social media has changed a lot, as we all sure acknowledged. But it's only really by looking at data sometimes and really going, okay, we sort of, we know, we think there's been a change. I know, we've got a suspicion, but how is it? What does that actually look like? And actually, is it worth doing some of these things that we've always been doing? And what are the new things we should be doing? So I think for me, I'm always excited by the opportunity to use data to look at how we can improve what we do. In my work, I work a lot with Darren Caveney as well, as many of you know, in Comms 2.0 and local government. I've looked at a lot of data and I start to observe trends. And when it was the residents' doctor strike just before Christmas, it came to mind about this idea of the use of stock assets and the sharing of assets. And I see, this is a mock-up of one sort of I was looking at recently for a client, and it's that sort of standard stock image, some text, and then a logo. So that's kind of an approximation of what it looks like. And this is just one example that I've dug out of what I've started to see. So this was local authority. So you see there, you've got this is exactly the same content. It's the same post, it's the same graphic, it's the same content, it's duplicate content each time. And you can see these have been posted a week apart on the left-hand side. So there's something, sort of 1 week, then just wait a week, then wait another week. That's actually, better than some I've seen. I've seen, repeat posting day after day after day, same thing. And it would be much more stark. It'd be a slope straight downwards. You'd see it, my conclusion from looking at the data is that, the more rapid you are with just putting the same stuff out, the quicker it is to, hit the bottom, basically. So you see a little bit, you could go, oh, there's a bit of a pickup there, but let's look at the numbers as well. The numbers are low, aren't they? This was a local authority with 40,000, Facebook followers. So these are low, these are kind of bumping along the bottom. And this is one example, of what happens to engagements and clicks when you just sort of put the same thing out. And this is obviously on the same account. What I've also, so my kind of going into this, my theory was, okay, it'd be interesting to see then, so my, my best guess is that the reason this is happening is that there's possibly a bit of user kind of fatigue, but more likely this is algorithmic. This is AI-driven algorithms now that are pretty smart, going, this is the same content we've seen before. We're not going to push this. We're not going to show this to people. This is kind of spam, really. And across a whole network like Meta, my strong suspicion is that this is what happens. So repeat content where it's exactly the same or very similar gets downgraded. So let's have a look. Let's have a look. This is the essence of my post on LinkedIn, which some of you may have actually seen and contributed to. If so, thank you. So that account's got 1.3 million followers, and I think the thing to say up front, obviously, is of all these examples, this isn't the only comms that would be going out about this. Of course, there would be many other channels and methods used, but we're interested here in organic social and its value, aren't we? So that's what we're focusing on. So it's had if you can see that 615 reactions. There's no links to click here as far as I could see. So this is sort of the messaging here in the post is the messaging that that's the action, I guess, is for people to take note of this. And it's had about 800 comments and 600 shares. So, pretty chunky, I suppose, okay. But then I wanted to look at what happened on when exactly the same content was reposted on other NHS accounts. And this is, as a data person, I'll be the first to say this was a bit of a quick and dirty exercise. You would want more data to draw firmer conclusions, but as an indicator, it was useful. So we've got NHS Somerset, 6,500 followers, about 600,000 residents when I did a bit of research, and that's had nine reactions and 9 shares, so 18 bits of engagement as far as we can see. we look at Cornwall, similar followers, similar residents. That's done nothing, basically one share, and that was, you know, some. I think I looked at this on the 17th, so I gave it kind of a day to sort of settle down. And then ambulance, South East Coast Ambulance Trust. So just a point here, again, from looking at the data, straight sharing of content. It'd be interesting to see what others sort of say on this as well. Everything I see says that is never going to do anything for you, even if you perhaps add your own sort of comments or content. But it will never, because it's just duplicate content, and the share generally is sort of seems to be rated quite low by Meta and by Facebook. So that's kind of had two reactions and 2 shares, and that's, you know, they cover 4.5 million residents. So again, very low. So, you know, building a picture again of this sort of this kind of toolkit, same asset, everybody put it out, isn't really working in organic social, it isn't cutting through. And to round off, because we've got loads of other really interesting speakers who we need to get to, so just some comments from other people. So senior comms manager in an ICS saying there that yes, you know, it does reflect what they're seeing. Toolkits do have some value, so they're making a case for having some value. So it'd be interesting to see, you know, if anybody wants to pick up on that. But saturation's a problem on organic social, and they're saying that, you know, that problem, multiple accounts at the same time, the algorithms deprioritize them. That's their experience, and that actually limits the reach. That, you know, actually the thing that you're trying to do is counterproductive. Another special sort of PR and social media specialist now who works in education, saying really it's an outdated tactic. You know, things have moved on. It was the good old days of Twitter and blogging, but, you know, it doesn't work anymore. And they're saying, I can't tell you how many of these kits I'm still sent, but they never work. And then another one, just to pull out finally, saying anything we produce ourselves always outperforms this type of national regional toolkit. And we've started to use paid social for the really important stuff to ensure reach, and that might be something that some of the speakers pick up on as well. So there's the context for you there. So I know we're talking about social media in general today, but my specific focus on that was the use of organic social for toolkits. I know we've got other speakers who are going to talk about where they have found success with organic social, so that will be interesting today. Yeah, obviously if you do want any help with using data in your communications, either whether that's deep dive social media or whether that's training for your team to become more data literate, you can drop me a line. But yes, I will hand back to you, Russell.
That's great, thank you, Alex. I just really want to add that, you know, I hope nobody feels like we're picking on them or bashing them. You know, I mean, you know, the people who produce those toolkits and those of us who share them, we're all doing it for all the right reasons. What we're trying to do is help you see how you can get most impact from you know, the time that you spend. So yeah, I'm going to bring Farid in now to talk to us. Introduce yourself at the start, please.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm Farid Norat. So I'm a communications officer at Rochdale Borough Council. My portfolio is the Public Health and Public Protection Directorate. So I've been at Rochdale only for about 3 months now, and before that, I was portfolio holder for Public Health at Manchester City Council as well. So yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about what my experience with toolkits and public health comms has been. Because I mean, first of all, a lot of what Alex has said really resonates with my experience of toolkits anyway. I feel like the whole discussion around them is kind of more tied up with like how we do comms in general. So I do feel toolkits can be useful for organizations, particularly with smaller staff and smaller resources, because it means that we can put out the national message and we can cover important topics, but it keeps us as comms officers a little bit more agile to meet our service requirements as well. So if we have that national toolkit through, we can get the message out there, move on to the next thing, And because of budget constraints as well, it is just really difficult for an authority like the one that I'm in to cover absolutely everything in really great depth. But the issue that I do find with toolkits is that at the end of the day, our regional requirements for a campaign aren't really covered in it, and they're not really covered in the national message anyway. So, how I personally approach toolkits is not to just blanket put out every single asset, every line of copy. I'll compensate by tailoring the copy so it's specific to my audience and to the aims of my own campaign. And also, I work quite closely with our local NHS partners, so I'll ask them to amend any assets if I need to, just to make it a little bit more specific to our campaign. Because I do think health bodies locally understand the barriers that comms professionals have when we're tackling these issues. So they are usually quite open to working with us anyway. Personally, I think it's important to do content alongside the toolkit message that you're putting out. And that content that you're putting out can actually be organic anyway. The main thing that's important for me is to do content that's speaking to your own audience directly. And that can take the form of like sharing human interest stories or doing videos with like local health professionals or just talking to residents, sharing experience. So it does require a bit of time and energy, but there is a cost benefit to it because it's organic and it's free, and you'll almost always get better engagement. And that quote that Alex showed there about the person saying that when they do their own content, it gets better engagement anyway, that really resonates with what I've seen and what I've done anyway. Overall, I do think that the issue that I find with toolkits is that they're kind of symptomatic of like a wider problem that exists with national health messaging anyway, in that they just can't address regional concerns and regional barriers. The only people who understand what barriers are to people accessing healthcare are local health and comms professionals, because we speak to our residents and, you know, we know what's going on in our areas. And so national messaging can actually be quite confusing if it doesn't directly address those concerns. And I think for me, that was like the big lesson from COVID. We had a big top heavy message telling people, you know, what they need to do to stay safe, but actually it wasn't addressing, you know, the regional concerns that were going on. You know, the UK was broken up into tiers, so everyone was having to follow, you know, different safety precautions regardless of it. And what I'm doing now as part of my role is to try and make sure that I'm understanding those barriers, talking to residents, working really closely with like stakeholders and partners, and making sure that human side of like understanding what those barriers are is then integrated into our comm strategies. And then that means that when we do need to cascade the national message, we can actually bring it to our audience by addressing what their concerns are within it. And because we're addressing those human needs, we're also opening up the comms to give it a bit more of a human focus so we can try new things. And I think that's what the approach of like our other like fellow comms colleagues on the calls do as well. When you recognize that human need in there, then you open up your approach to it a bit more. I mean, for example, when I first started in comms about 6 years ago out in Manchester, and the first thing that I worked on was a campaign called MCR COVID Stories. And that was a behavior change campaign, encouraging people to like stay home, but also sort of motivating them in order to keep safe. And we were tackling what the national message was, which was like stay safe, stay the NHS, stay home. And we were speaking directly to residents, directly to stakeholders, and understanding what their motives. Took all of that qualitative data and then we turned it into a narrative to tell a story. And we're telling people stories about why they're staying safe, why they're staying at home, and it's because they want to keep their family safe, they want to see their friends, they want to work through it together. So we were getting that regional data and then making our own content with it, but it was coinciding with the national message. To bring it back to toolkits, toolkits does restrict how we're going to tackle that issue locally. So yeah, so just in conclusion for me, I think, yeah, if you're doing public health, all of your campaigns need to be focused on local data, and that's going to be informing your strategy. Unfortunately, toolkits don't always meet that requirement, but you can do your organic content alongside it if capacity allows you to do so. And it does pay off if you can. Yeah.
That's great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Farid. Niamh, can I ask you to come in and introduce yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Niamh. I am a communications officer at Manchester City Council. I've been at Manchester for about 3 years now, sort of, and before that my background was in like private social media marketing, email marketing, that sort of thing. I do have some slides, so I'll just share my screen if everyone can see that, hopefully. But yeah, so I think actually you can tell Farid and I used to work together, because I think sort of what I've prepared follows on quite nicely, because I think what I sort of wanted to bring today was looking at a few just examples of how we've taken toolkit messages and brought that into a more organic approach on our socials. And I think something that's quite important to me is being able to look at the fact that you don't always need ad spend, you don't need budget all the time to make posts that get really good engagement, that raise awareness and that have an impact. So I'll just talk through a couple of these examples. So this is one that came about quite recently, where we were wanting to promote how well our trading standards team have done in the last year, how many sort of knockoff items they've taken, how much value that means on Manchester streets, that sort of thing. We created these assets. We do create them in-house, so we have a bit of control of what that looks like, but ultimately putting assets like the one on the left here out resulted in 1,800 views and 2 likes, no clicks, no comments, and as you could, sort of goes without saying, that didn't have all that much impact. Something that we were quite keen to do was look at if this is something we can go on to communicate to our younger audience, which is obviously where TikTok comes in, which is something that's sort of quite close to my heart. Our TikTok account is something I'm quite passionate about. And first of all, I had to have the argument in saying we are not putting this graphic on TikTok. That would be ridiculous. And then it was, well, what do we put out? How do we make it interesting? And that's where I came up with this idea of rating things that the team had seized in the last year. And there was just, they were just these random photos that the team had created. It took them, not long to take these pictures, sent them over to us and created like a bit of a ranking. I don't know if I can, but you can see there 42,000 views, 856 likes, 51 comments, 50 shares, 36 saves. And this wasn't one where we had like a link to send people to. And I think especially on TikTok, that's not really, you can have like a link tree and put stuff in your bio, but I think ultimately, if you can make, the content has to stand up on its own, and it almost sort of like you're forced into creating that more authentic approach. And all of a sudden now we've got 42,000 young people in the city who care about these knockoff like hairdryers that have been taken off the streets. We've got people having conversations. I'll take a look at the some of the comments we got under that post, and people saying, I want to actually work in this thanks to seeing this. People asking us questions about the content and what happens to the things that we take. People laughing at the dog at the end. And I think it sort of just shows it didn't take long. It probably, you could argue, it took, it was quicker to put that TikTok together than it was to put the graphic together and get that scheduled. And it just made so much more of an impact because it told that real story. It made people laugh, engaged people who otherwise never would have cared. And as much as, I think it goes without saying, I'm sort of working for a local authority, so it's not all of our content is going to match what a huge amount of sort of yourselves are doing or in public health. But those concepts have been able to take not the content as it stands, not a graphic, not an asset that everyone else is doing, but taking the message and doing something with it that is more sort of you, that makes more sense for your brand. I think that's sort of what I'm trying to get across, that it is possible and it doesn't take loads of, you don't have to put loads of ad spend behind it all the time. Another example is when we had Central Library close, which is like the big sort of main library in Manchester. Again, had these assets, sent these out as toolkits to everyone, and I thought I think this is where sort of the idea of the toolkit having a purpose does come in, because actually whereas the other one was more about wanting to sort of promote our teams, get people engaged in what's happening in the streets to make them feel safer. This was more of an awareness campaign. We just wanted people to know the library's going to be closed. If you show up, you're not going to be able to get in. That's sort of the purpose of it. But eventually you just put out enough of these graphics and people are going to stop paying attention. You know, 5,600 views, 13 likes, 8 clicks. It's, you know, pretty sort of standard. And instead, what I was quite keen to do is have a think about getting people engaged in why we were closing it, why it mattered. And then you think, well, how are you going to make people care about, we were doing it to upgrade the internet, the Wi-Fi, are people going to care? And what we did was look through the archive sort of footage we have of the library and made a post that was around, this is what it used to look like, this is, you know, do you remember how Central Library looked? Did your parents go to Central Library, you know, in these times when it had sort of great halls and looked like this? And sort of trying to spur nostalgia and then bringing that into saying, well, this was the past, we're bringing it into the future, and this is sort of, it just creates that storytelling. It was a really easy, again, really easy post to knot together. It has the same message. It tells people it's closed, it tells people why it closed, but it made people care about the fact that we're doing these upgrades. And again, 25,000 views, 244 likes, and again, looking at the comments, you know, it just spurred nostalgia. It stirred people to care about what we were doing. They thought, oh, I used to love going to the library. I have so many great memories there. I did all my schoolwork there. I went in and studied there. Look what's happening now into the future. And then sort of just to take it in, because I knew I had to bring some public health into it. And this is a post that I think is just really, really great. And it's not something I could take credit for. It's our public health comms team who did this. But again, so got a toolkit, and maybe this is something that many of yourselves have seen, all about stop smoking. And again, I'm sure this is one that many other local authorities and NHS groups sent out. So 1,600 views, 5 likes, 4 clicks. What our public health comms team did was reach out to, I think, somebody who works here, but her dad had taken part in the programme that we were promoting. And we just did a storytelling piece. We talked about her dad. We talked about the fact that he hadn't just done it for himself. He stopped smoking because he wanted to support her. He wanted to ensure he could be there for his family going forward. And again, this is one that took a little bit more investment, but the emotional impact, where again, you've now gone to nearly 18,000 views and 89 clicks compared to 4 on the previous when we used the standard toolkit asset. It speaks for itself. And I hope, you know, essentially what I really am keen to illustrate is that, really, again, much to Farid's point, the value in being able to take a message that you've been given, or to sort of pulling that out and being able to extract that and say, well, what does it mean to us and how can we create something out of that? And ultimately, none of these posts took, you know, miles of time, took hours to do. It just took a bit of sort of forethought and sort of thinking outside the box a little bit. So, yes. I think that's everything from me.
That's brilliant, Niamh. There is hope for organic by the sounds. And on that note, I want to ask Anna to come in and talk to us. I'm quite excited about this. So yeah, please do, Anna. Please, if you can introduce yourself as well.
I will do. Hi everyone. Yeah, my name's Anne-Marie. I'm the social media manager in the NHS England social team. Been here since about 2019 within my current team for the last 2. Prior to that, I was in NHS Digital. So yeah, I've got 5 minutes to run through a very recent post you may have seen about how we used Harry Styles for some important cervical screening messaging. So the idea originally, I wanted to do something nostalgic. So this was my original idea. So this was pretty much signed off and ready to go. But yeah, the reason for this idea was I really wanted to hit like a particular audience for cervical screening prevention, cervical Prevention Week with a memory. So if they remember a certain era, it may be time for their cervical screening. So I still used Harry in this, but I just used him within One Direction. The in-betweeners, if anybody watched that show, and then sort of like things you remember from school, like smelly gel pens, iPods, etc. But a few weeks ago, my whole feed was full of Harry Styles and his new album announcement, and that's when I thought maybe we could use this. So I like Harry, and apart from following him on just his social media, I don't follow anything else of his or any fan accounts. So I was sort of surprised at the amount of content I was seeing from channels that I don't even follow just about Harry. And that's when I thought there may be an opportunity here, which brought me on to this next idea. So if you've seen this, apologies if it's like the 100th time that you've seen it, I'm really sorry, but my idea was to use an old image of Harry from his X Factor audition, his album, which was everywhere at that point, and then a stock image of a cervical screening with the text, if you remember this Harry and you're excited for this Harry, it may be time for your cervical screening. So I think the way that it's been put together, it makes you read it. It's listed, so I think it is quite eye-catching. We did keep the image quite light-hearted, but the messaging alongside it, we kept that pretty formal and informative, as I explained the importance of it. So yeah, after getting that signed off by my bosses and by the screening team, it was scheduled for Saturday morning. Didn't really think anything else of it when I woke up that day. Went for a dog walk, came home, checked in on it, and at that point it had around 5,000 likes. But that's until a few hours later when the papers started to cover it. So I think around 4 hours after posting, the Metro actually did a whole article on it. That was followed by the Mirror, and then following into that week after, that was picked up with a piece in the Times by Caitlin Moran, and my local paper, the Donny Free Press, jumped on it. So my mum was very excited about that. And then following that, we had TV and podcasts covering it. So it was mentioned on ITV's Lorraine, quite a few radio stations covered, and podcasts, which I wasn't expecting. So we had, if anyone's heard of the Love of Huns account, it's a really big like pop culture social account, and Nick Grimshaw and Annie Mac also covered it on their podcast. Nick actually said we should start clapping for the social team at 5 p.m. like we did during COVID, which was just a ridiculous comment, but our team found it quite funny. But yeah, overall, the comments we just loved. We received hundreds of posts from people saying that they've booked the screening because of this, or it was a great reminder because they've forgotten. I've included my favourite comment on this from the post, which says this one here: NHS using Harry nostalgia to save lives is actually genius marketing. If 2010 girls can't get me to book it, nothing will. I just found that so funny. So yeah, the aftermath of it then. So we had over, this is as of yesterday, we had over 396,000 likes. We've had over 12 million views on that. Just over 97% of those views are actually from people that don't follow the NHS Instagram account. We've had over 1,800 comments, over 12,000 reposts, and over 17,000 bookmarks or people saving it. So on that as well, we also saw an increase in visits to the cervical screening page following that post of around 34%. So hopefully we'll see some impact soon on bookings. Don't know when that will be, but hopefully soonish. But overall, I think this post worked because people just didn't expect to see the NHS posting about Harry Styles. It was shareable. It was on one post and not over multiple images like sometimes we see with carousels on Instagram, and it landed with the right audience as well. So 67% of the audience fitted within the 25 to 64 age demographic, which is the age you're invited for cervical screening. So yeah, it worked out pretty well, that one. But yeah, thank you for inviting me to go through that.
You're getting lots of love and applause in the comments. Thank you for sharing it with us. It's yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. I think that there is some comments around, and I know you've alluded to this. It'd be great to see kind of what impact it has on screening rates. You know.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But well done.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Because we've still got a couple more speakers. So, Helena, can we bring you in, please?
You can. Hi, Russell. I can't. It's hard to follow that, Anne-Marie. That was fantastic. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Helena from Orlo, and so the reason that I'm here sort of to talk today is just about what we see from Orlo customers and across the platform, and the thousands of messages and the organic content that comes out through our channels. Can I ask you a quick question of the room first, though? Give me an emoji reaction, a thumbs up or whatever. Have you ever posted something that you suspected wouldn't land, but you just needed to show that you shared it to the powers that be? Yeah, quite a few reactions there. I have I have in my previous, I used to be head of comms of Staffordshire County Council, and before I worked at Orlo, I worked at Transport for Greater Manchester before that, and I've been that person in that comms team just sharing it to tick that box. And again, have you produced a toolkit with the best intentions to be helpful to other comms teams, maybe in your network, in your LRF or anything, thinking I'm going to do that and then make it easier for them? Again, me too. I used to produce the toolkits about campaigns that we're working on and share it out to ask people to run with it. And as Alex has shown with the data, and as all these examples have just shown, that's not the way to do it anymore. You used to, God, if you're as old as me, do you remember thunderclaps on Twitter and stuff when you all used to post the same thing at the same time? We used to do it for the National Flood Campaign for the Environment Agency, and everybody had to make that noise at the same time, and that's how you made an impact. But as Alex has said, things have moved on so much and the algorithms are so different now that you just can't do that anymore. It's pretty safe to say that although we think that organic is definitely not dead, and Niamh, Farid and Anne-Marie have definitely proved that with their examples today. But when we look at all those thousands of accounts that run through Orlo, and they're all public sector accounts, the situation still comes up time and time again. We keep seeing it. And I think it's not because teams don't understand what good looks like. You do. You know what good looks like. You know when something feels a bit flat. Your experience is telling you that it's not going to land. But when we speak to the Orlo customers about why they're doing it, it's usually about time, pressure, the sense that this is the safest thing to do to get it approved by managers who are watching, or if you're in the council, if they're the leaders want you to share the right thing, it ticks that box. But what we tend to see is that posts that are struggling, it's not because the information is wrong, because these toolkits are generally well-intentioned, they've got good facts in them, they've got useful data, but it's because it doesn't feel specific enough to the people that are reading it or you're trying to engage with. And when lots of organisations are sharing that same content in that same format at roughly the same time, it's not that the engagement is falling away dramatically, it just quietly drops off and it fizzles off, like Alex showed earlier. So I think that's when teams start to question, is organic social even worth it at all? And you start thinking about having to pay and put money behind it to have impact. And that's certainly the conversation I used to have with my teams a couple of years ago. But as we can see now, with the right data behind it and the right effort, you can still have an impact with organic. From our point of view, the issue isn't really that toolkits exist. They're not the villain. It's about you and how much confidence and flexibility you feel like you've got to use them, and how confident you feel in making the changes. The posts that land better are the ones that feel owned, a small tweak to the language, a local reference, a different time of day, a more human tone, a great story, exactly what Farid and Niamh were saying earlier with those brilliant examples. For me, I think this is where social listening really helps. Can I have another emoji reaction if you're already using a social listening tool or doing some social listening, just so I can gauge if you're doing it? Good. Yeah, nice to see a few there. A laughing emoji, does that mean, haha, I can't possibly do it, or I've not got time to do it? Because to me, social listening, it shouldn't be, I know a lot of people think that it's a nice to have, it's an extra thing that teams have to do, but it shouldn't be. For me, it should be part and parcel of your social strategy. Use it as a way of giving you evidence and confidence. It's data, and as Alex was saying, data is key to making your strategies work. If you can see and understand what people in your area, your audiences, your demographics are already talking about, what questions they're asking, what language they're using, it becomes much easier to adapt the toolkit so it actually reflects local reality and that the messages will land. So instead of guessing or relying on instinct or vibes, we've all been there, I've reacted on vibes. Teams have got something to sort of anchor your decision decisions too. Like Anne-Marie, if you didn't have some data to say that these people were the ones about needing the screening and needing how to access it and the right age group, you wouldn't have known to use Harry, that it was the right demographic to actually go for. You know, you might have been using Barry Manilow or Tom Jones, who knows? So I think as well, what it does, having that data, gives you an argument for the leadership who are telling you to use the standard toolkit, because what I know some of you have come up against is that leadership risk aversion. It's like, how is this going to work? They're not the target audience, so they don't see how that might understand, and they don't value your comms experience sometimes. So having some data and insight in your back pocket gives you permission to say back to them, this message needs a different emphasis here, or this is the right time to share it at a different moment. This is the wording that will make sense to our audience. So I think having all that from social listening will help your position when you do want to be something that the powers that be will think is a little bit riskier. So when people ask whether organic social still has a role, I would say, and we all would say, that it does. It just works best when it's used to add context or clarity and build trust, rather than carrying that entire campaign on its own. Organic hasn't stopped working. I think it's just become much less forgiving of anything that feels generic.
That's great. Thank you, Helena. Yeah, I mean, I think developing your message with insight is something that, as a behavioural scientist, I would strongly recommend. So yeah, I'm going to ask John Paul to come in and introduce himself and just say a few words.
Hello, yes, I'm John Paul from CAN, and I've been so impressed by all the speakers today. CAN work a lot with Orlo as part of the Future Comms team framework, and hearing this slightly deliberately provocative proposition, Russell, I knew we'd see some great examples, and I wanted to talk a little bit about proving value, because there is a sort of hidden assumption in there that what we do and using these channels is valueless. Some of the Future Comms team's principles are making sure that everyone's included, that we reach 100% of a target audience, that everything we do saves money and demonstrates value, and obviously everything is measured as well. And so that made me think about, could we make something that would make it easy for you to demonstrate the value of social media using money? I think it's really important that whilst the data can show something good is happening, putting a monetary value on it can sometimes change the minds of the spreadsheet thinkers, the bean counters, the head people rather than the heart people, to help them understand what we've done and why it's important. So I wanted to give you some formulae. Using comparative value, if you take the number of views that a post has had, divide it by 1,000 and times it by £3, which is an average of cost per 1,000 impressions across lots of different media, you can show the sort of comparative value of that post. Also, if you look at the number of clicks, likes, shares, interactions, and times it by 50p, you can start to show what the value generated by that post was. Now, that has a number of useful applications, I think. One is, if you add all that up, say on a monthly basis, I remember James Bird from Ealing Council talking about generating 2.5 million views in a given month. Well, we can say that if they bought it, would have been worth about £7,500. And I think it was around about 3,000 interactions generated. So again, about £1,500. So those social media accounts are generating £9,000 worth of paid media value for you. I remember you used to talk about column inches and things like that in the past to justify the value of PR. So I thought that could be quite interesting and maybe useful for team managers who are justifying their investment in social media. also, when we look at some of the data, maybe if you're trying to convince someone why posting what they want or what they've been given versus doing something localized, story-based is more valuable. Niamh showed 2 examples, one generating 1,800 views and 2 interactions, valued at about £6.40. And then her approach, generating 42,000 views, £626. That is 100 times pretty much more valuable. And when we can do things and take approaches that increase the value by a factor of 100 in the public sector, that's pretty compelling evidence. Often we're trying to reduce by 10%, increase by 30%, but 100x improvement just by taking a different approach to telling a story it can be quite compelling. And when we look at Anne-Marie's impact, you're looking at almost £250,000 worth of value generated by that post. I think bonuses, big summer party, all those sorts of things. Maybe, maybe not. But I think it's worth them saying, if you'd gone and bought this, that's what you would have had to have paid. And we've done this just by being creative. So we're building this calculator. If you want it, let me know. There is one last bit to this, however, where the super skeptical could say, okay, but so what? We saw some of that traffic from the US, from Belgium, from probably Harry Styles fans all over the place. What impact did it have in the area that we look after? How many of our target audience saw this? And Anne-Marie said, 65, I think it was 65% of people interacting were from the target audience. But I think at a more local level, you could have that challenge. And we could take that negatively, or we could take it positively as an opportunity for a wider conversation. So like Russell suggested, asking for the service data and looking for increases in bookings of cervical screenings in that instance, and then showing that correlating with interaction could be really powerful. And then the next stage of the conversation is, well, we have content that is now proven to work. So why not let's amplify locally to that audience more frequently using yes paid, but making sure that we've included everyone and reached everyone on the channels that they're actually using. So Snapchat, YouTube, and things like that in certain demographics. And so we can sort of think of it as a demonstrating value, demonstrating why taking our advice and our approach is valuable. And then it could lead to a conversation where you're getting to a point where you're able to demonstrate that you found content, you then amplified it, and then were able to demonstrate a saving for the NHS or saving for the local authority based on every pound that you spent. So this is about, yes, the publishing and the content creation side of what we do, but then also really accelerating outcomes, savings for our organizations, improving lives for people by moving that content creation, that PR press publisher approach into the sort of performance marketing approach, and using the brilliant content we create to generate real outcomes for the people we look after. So just to sort of put it in summary, listen, tell stories, tailor, be creative, then measure, improve, and find out what works. Then correlate that with service data, and then make the case for investing in amplification to make sure that everybody's included and that content doesn't just disappear into our past feeds, but we can deliver it and to motivate action. And then just repeat that whole process. Do let me know if you'd like that calculator. We're developing it at the moment. It's very much in beta, but hopefully it'll be useful in justifying everything that you do.
Thanks, John Paul. I'm just going to take a few questions. There's one, and there's a lot of interest in the calculator in chat already. One question around where you got the £3 and the 50p figures from.
So we buy lots and lots of media for public sector campaigns, over 4,000 of them. And if you take an aggregate CPM and cost per 1,000 impressions and cost per 1,000 interactions across news, social, video platforms, Twitch, Reddit, Nextdoor, all of these, on average, the cost per 1,000 impressions is around about $3.80, or getting around about the £3 mark. The £3 mark is probably a little bit of an underestimate, actually, so you're very safe. If it's scrutinized, the number would probably be higher across all media. So it's a conservative estimate of the value rather than an over optimistic one. And then the same applies to the interactions. So 50p is a bit of a conservative estimate about cost per interaction across all of those kinds of channels.
Thank you. I'm going to take a few more. So I think this one's probably, well, this one is for Anne-Marie. It's a couple of questions around the legalities of using the Harry Styles image and whether you needed to get approval before that from him or his team, or how you kind of approach that.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and we've been asked this a lot on LinkedIn. So for this particular one, we decided to take the risk, mainly because it was everywhere. There was a lot of memes everywhere. I think Greg James started the first one. So that's pretty much what gave me the idea for it. But yeah, there is a very fine line. So yeah, we took the risk on it, and we did consider the impact that it had. So I think for this sort of messaging, it sort of outweighed. There would have been more positive impact than there would have been negative on it. So yeah, for that reason, that's why we used it. But it's not something we do all the time. I think the last time we used it was we did some messaging. I can represent him with my T-shirt, but we did a post on Oasis for their reunion tour, and the importance of wearing sunscreen, if anyone saw that, and that did really well. Again, we used it, we had no impact on it. So yeah, not all the time, but I think it's probably easier coming from a big account rather than a smaller one.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And there's a bit of stuff in there about TikTok, and I'd be quite interested to ask. Well, some people have said about TikTok being banned within the NHS, and I know there are some organisations that don't like using it. But Niamh, be interested to know kind of how you got around that in your council, and also whether. My experience of working with councils, sometimes sign-off processes can be a nightmare, and whether how you approach that and how you manage to get the trust to do such good creative work on TikTok.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a conversation for us as well, really, at the council around using TikTok. I think it's sort of banned on all government devices. I'll be honest and say I just have it on my personal account, and I think it's one of those things where being able to prove the value and prove the impact of it has meant that actually we're at a point where we've got quite a lot of, almost too much buy-in from some of our exec members and higher up people who want to use TikTok a lot. But I think so. For us, it's been a long journey of sort of, there's a time when some of the stuff that I post now on TikTok 2 years ago would not have been approved, and it's been a journey of being able to prove, if we go a bit mad, if we do things a bit silly, it's fine, nothing's going to fall apart, and it's going to have an impact. I mean, in terms of getting sign off, I think the sort of approach, again, as I say, I'm at a point now where I think I can screen record some of the weirdest sort of trends and TikToks I've put together, send it to some of our really senior members, and they've gone ahead with it. I think there's an element of people say, look, this isn't for us and we're going to trust you, Niamh, and that comes with me, sort of me and the team being able to sort of prove that we deserve that trust through stuff like what JP and all the other speakers have mentioned, proving value, proving impact. And I think but when it comes to stuff that you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. For something so creative where you just know people who don't get it are going to look and go, what is that? Change this. The approach I use, and sort of a tip I'd go with, is sort of getting the message signed off, not the content. So if I pull together a video, it could use whatever trend, or it could look however. I will say this is the copy I'm going to use, or this is the messaging, is the information I've included in the post correct? So for that trading standards one that I showed earlier, I think I did show that to the relevant press officer, because he gets it. But otherwise it would have been, so I'm going to say we've collected this much in revenue, whatever, we've, you know, confiscated this many. Have I sort of, you know, sometimes certain scenes are more sensitive, so I'm making sure I've protected that. But otherwise I'd say, look, make sure that's signed off. I'll worry about how it looks. I'll worry about the social, because ultimately, you know, I as a social media person need to take that confidence and have that stand to say this isn't for you to sign off. But I think so it's sort of bit smoke and mirrors a little bit, but as long as what matters is that the message is signed off. And then afterwards you can say, look how did it well it did, and then hopefully you start to build a bit of trust in what your vision and what you want to do, really.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a really interesting question from Anthony, which I'll have a go at answering, but others might have a thought on it as well. I'll try and sort of paraphrase the question, but it's rather than multiple organisations sharing the same toolkit image and text, is it better if one central account shares it and ask partners to share from their profile to their own? So that I lead like regional campaigns, you know, and that's an approach I've tried recently. I'd have to look at the data to see whether that does work, and it'd be definitely interesting. But so I tried to do that rather than, because I do have an expectation to send out a toolkit. We're all so used to them, and when people know you're doing a campaign, they're all saying, "Oh, we'll share your toolkit. Let us have it," you know. So I've moved away from that and trying to get people to share from one central account. But then it's also, I think, about thinking about what other owned accounts they have that may not be, you know, organic social posts. I mean, you know, I know WhatsApp is technically an organic, it's technically a social media channel, but, you know, there will be people in organizations who either run WhatsApp channels or are part of community WhatsApp channels who might be able to help share your messaging. There are, you know, bulletins that partner organizations send out where you may be able to place ads or copy, you know, adverts on websites you might be able to access through some of your partners' free out-of-home advertising. Yeah, that kind of thing I think is much more. And also, you know, that in our organizations there will be people who interact with your residents face to face regularly. If you can get them on board and get them, you know, helping to share your messaging, that's going to have much more impact, I think. Does any of my other speakers want to come in on this specific question?
I can come in on that if you want, Russell.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I have had experience of resharing stuff from like singular accounts. In my experience, I have found that the performance is usually better than just using the standard toolkit thing. But the issue's still the same, because you're doing it from an account that's got like a massive reach, that's not just your own audience. You still need to tailor it anyway. And so like I still find like it doesn't always land. It might perform a little bit better, the impressions might be a little bit better, but it doesn't always land either. So that's just what I found, especially when I've been doing the flu campaign this year as well, and I've been sharing UK HSA assets. Yeah, just to get the national messaging out there too. So yeah, it performs a little bit better, but it's still got similar issues to me, I found.
Great, thank you. Niamh?
Yeah, so it's just, I guess, relevant to that. It's something, it's quite new. It's not something we've done a lot yet. But over the summer last year, sort of one of our biggest campaigns was the Oasis reunion. It was happening in Heaton Park, which is one of ours. And we had it was a huge operation over months of promoting it, all our other activations and stuff. And one approach that we trialed was I set up like an automation that would, anytime we posted using keywords related to the campaign, so it was like Manchester Live 25, Oasis, stuff like that, it would automatically pull it into a spreadsheet that then had, I think it was like a Google sheet that had like the link, copy, the graphic, all of that automatically. So it was very hands off for us. And then we alongside, we also did toolkits and the like, but then sent that link to all our relevant partners and said, check this, and you can just reshare this. So, trying to put it in their hands and say like, so it worked really, really well on our side with setting it up. It was really cool. It was, you could see everything, could make sure it weren't, and it just been, we'd put out a post and others could then reshare it easily. The only thing is the uptake on the other side of our partners wasn't quite there. And sort of trying to get, and it's similar with toolkits. Sometimes we'll send stuff out and you're like, please post things, please, and you can only do so much. But actually we sort of hope that would make things a bit easier, and I can't say in that instance we saw that it had a huge impact. So I think it's something to still play with, but I think it's one of those where there's almost I think we've had more success with from the get-go at the start of campaigns, having those conversations with partners early on and sort of deciding what the approach is going to be. Something that we found quite useful is like on Instagram, you can do collab posts. So if we'll say, look, we won't post something if you're doing it, add us as a collaborator, and it shows up on both our profiles, stuff like that. So I think to really have an impact when it comes to that sort of network amongst partners, that isn't just you're all just putting the same stuff out, but actually sharing and taking from one another. I think those conversations have to happen quite early in the campaign, and you sort of have to build that relationship with them to understand that you're both on the same sort of level.
Yeah, that makes sense. Helena?
Yeah, they're both really interesting points on that. I think where I'd come in to say is that if people are following your corporate accounts, it's rare that they're there to follow on this specific thing that you want to engage them with. It's your generic audiences, like you were saying. So I think where the impact really comes from is people follow people who are like them, they listen to people who are like them, and that's where that engagement really happens. So if you are able to get people to share and like and comment who are like the target audience, your advocates and your influencers, and we all know influencer is changing in the shape of that, but those key local trusted figures, trusted voices from, say, a particular community or a demographic that you want to reach, and you get them to engage with that content, that's going to land better than partners and sharing it from from corporate accounts, unless you've got a really well targeted and set up social account that has got lots of people in that audience. So I think it's just about finding that flexibility, and again, the listening and the data will tell you who is influential in that space, who's making lots of comments on that, who's talking about Oasis, who's talking, everybody, but I was there. So who are the people who are talking about the merchandise or telling you what the set lists are going to be in advance or things, and get them to engage with your content, and it's much more likely to reach the people that you want it to reach.
Great, thank you. I'm aware of time, and we are losing people, but I'm just going to take one more if that's okay. There's one for Anne-Marie around the Harry post, and just saying, did you repost and see a drop in engagement as Alex noted tends to happen, or was it just the one post?
We just did the one post. I think all the work was done for us when other people started sharing it. I think the main thing for us, we sort of wanted Harry to share it, but I think deep down we knew he wouldn't. But we got his mum and sister; they both liked it, so I think we got his seal of approval that way. But no, we didn't repost it. We just sort of let it do its thing, and luckily it worked.
Yeah. So his mum and sister reposted without any prompting?
No, so they just liked it. So we think we got the approval that way, but yeah, they gave it a like.
That's brilliant. Okay, I don't want to take up any more of everyone's time. I'd like to say a massive thank you to all my speakers. That was really, really interesting, and I think that the conclusion is that organic social's not dead, but that we maybe need to rethink the toolkits, and if we are going to use them, try and make sure we localize content and listen to take on board the local insight and localize their content. Potentially, once you've got something that's going to resonate, it may help putting a little bit of money behind it to get those results. But also, there are ways of increasing your chances of organic stuff landing.